So today we will be discussing answer writing. And firstly, I will talk about the introduction, body and conclusion, and then we will move on to what introduction, conclusion and what points in body we can write across various sections of all the GS papers so that our answers look a little better. So generally in introduction, what I used to do, I used to write definitions. If there is any scope for writing a definition, that is, it has been asked in the question itself. Say if the, for example, the question is on caste, I would try to define caste in introduction. And similarly across papers, if there is any concept that has been mentioned in the question itself, then I would try to define it in the introduction. And if there is no scope for writing any definition, then I will write some statistic in the introduction, but the stat should be relevant to the question that has been asked. So that was intro, general, stat or definition. And after introduction, in body, I used to follow point format. I did not do any paragraph format in even a single question. And in points also, my points used to be quite small, only 2 to 3 lines at max. And those points means I tried to write at least 10 points in a 10 marker question and 15 points in 15 marker question. That is the minimum I tried to write. Maybe in some questions where I do not have the content, I might only be able to write 8 points in a 10 marker or 13 or 12 points in a 15 marker, but my target was to at least reach 10 points in a 10 marker and 15 points in a 15. So that was about the body in general. And in conclusion, there are a lot of templates which you can use to write a conclusion, such as if the question means in GS2 you can use DPSPs and fundamental duties as your conclusion, and in similarly SDGs can be used in governance for conclusion. So if you remember say 2 or 3 pages of these things, then you can use them in conclusion of almost all of the questions of GS2 as well as GS. Even in GS3 the recommendations can be used, as we will discuss in detail when we move across paper. So that was the general introduction, body and conclusion format, and now we will discuss specifically. We will start with GS1 and we will start with sociology. Oh sorry, geography. Oh, history, right? History is the first part. So history. There are, in history, the conclusion, the introduction should be what happened before that event. Say the question is on Quit India movement. So you can write about the date, say it started in August 1942 and what it was preceded by, and it was a result of failure of the Cripps mission. So like that you are linking the concept that has been asked with the previous event. And in history the conclusion can be in similar pattern. It can be next event, that the Quit India movement proved to be the last nail in the coffin of British Empire and ultimately led to the independence of India in 1947. So in this way you are writing introduction by linking it with previous event, and conclusion is next event. And as far as body is concerned, in history, to get more marks we need to means sprinkle some keywords in our body of history answers. So what can be those keywords? Those keywords in body can be the name of persons, name of places and name of events. For example, if we are writing a question on 1857 revolt, then in the answers you should mention whether it is asked or not, and but you have to address what has been asked, but you can try to insert relevant info in your body, which includes persons, the people like Lakshmi Bai or Begum Hazrat Mahal, whoever led the revolt, the places at which the revolts took place, the prominent events during the revolt. So all these things you need to means make a conscious effort that whatever the question has been asked, I would try to make that question more detailed by inculcating these things into my answers when the history is asked. So these are, and dates, most importantly dates. The more dates you write, the more marks you get in history. Means where to write these things, right? So that depends on question. It can be in the form of, like, for example, like if the question is say on revolt, something is, it is there on revolt, you say that it was led by many prominent feudal leaders, such as for example Rani Lakshmi Bai, Tantia Tope. So here you are inserting this information in the form of examples, and otherwise even in form of points you can write like the revolt took place, the revolt was means located only in North India, concise to North India, and places such as Meerut or Bareilly were such as, like you do, such as Meerut, Bareilly, Kanpur, Jhansi. These were the prominent places where the revolt was there. So in some way or another you try to insert these things into your answer. And also in history we can draw a lot of maps. What I used to do is, means you can, there are these places, you can locate them here, here. So you can insert a map into your history as well. So that is something you can do. So that is the history part for answer writing. What you can do in introduction is previous event, in conclusion you can talk about the next event, and in body you can talk about these things. Means you should try to insert these things. So that is history. And then the next thing is sociology, society. So in society, the introduction basically was, for me it was, is quite difficult if there has not been any concept that has been discussed in the question. Like if the question is talking about caste, it is talking about regionalism, it is talking about communalism, then you can define these things. Or say if the question is on women and you know some stat, or you know the ranking of some social index, what is in the ranking of India in HDI or other such things, then you can put all these in introduction. But in some questions, if you cannot means put any of these things into your introduction, then what you can do is start with some generic quotes or anything that looks a little appealing and different. Like you can even start with, I remember in one of the vague questions I started with unity without uniformity and diversity without differences, or something like that. Whatever looks a little appealing or unique, you can start with it in intro. If you do not have, firstly you should try to write definition. If you do not have definition, you can go with after definition stat, like ranking in some social index, or from census, SCCC, whatever. If you have any of these stats, you can write. And if you do not have any of these, then you can write some slogan type of, or whatever looks appealing. So these are the three things with which you can start your answer on society. And after introduction, conclusion, you can simply write SDGs, because a lot of SDGs are linked to social aspects. So if you remember 14 SDGs, you will find that any question on society deals with one of those 14 aspects. So in conclusion, you can simply quote that doing so and so, whatever you have written in way forward above conclusion, you can say that by taking these steps, it will help us to achieve SDG number, say 10, if it is about reducing inequalities. or gender justice 3 or 4, whatever it is. So we can go like that. Conclusion. So for society, this is introduction and conclusion, and in body for society, we can focus on writing multiple dimensions of, like, you should break, we can break down most of the society questions into various dimensions such as region, religion, health, education, and other such pointers we can break down in society, and we can discuss along those lines. Region हो गया, religion हो गया, gender, health, education, poverty, condition of SC. So these are the pointers along which you can discuss a question on society. This may not be true for all the questions, but this is what you should try to implement whenever you get a chance. So that is about the body part, introduction and conclusion for society. So should we move on to geography? From where? Okay. So next thing is geography, and geography, what used to be my introduction, remember? This introduction, here also, if the question is on, say, wetland, then you can define what is wetland. If it is on Himalayan ecosystem, you can quote the recent IPCC report. IPCC reports are usually come, and they have, means they can be quoted on most of the questions that are being asked. Or say there is IPCC report, and yes, one of the important things which is important here, as well as disaster management and environment, PS3, which we will discuss here only. Here you can also write how much percent of area is vulnerable. Say if a question is on flood, then Rashtriya Baadh Ayog, I think, has given that 12% of area is 60%. 60% area is prone to flooding. If question is on cyclone, how much percent of India's coastline is vulnerable to cyclone? If the question is on drought, how much area is vulnerable to drought? These are all for every question, means every disaster you can prepare one line and from some authenticated source, and you can quote that in your introduction. So that is introduction for all the disasters. If there is any question on climate change, IPCC report can be your introduction. And if the question is on a static part, say ring of fire, there is a question on ring of fire or on volcanism or any other such things, then you can simply define it. So that was the introduction for geography. And in conclusion, as I also mentioned yesterday, my conclusion in geography was to link whatever has been asked. No, just what is ring of fire? I will draw the map. I will surely draw the map, but that will be in the body. And so, in conclusion, yes, link it with human aspects, human geography. The example I discussed yesterday, if it is on ring of fire, you can discuss how it has impacted infrastructure development in Japan or Indonesia, and how it has impacted the economy in Indonesia or in Japan. So like that, you can always link it with human geography and economic aspects of geography. Conclusion. So that is introduction and conclusion. And in body for geography, maps and diagrams, my opinion, these are must, and you should try to inculcate it even if it is difficult to inculcate them, because the examiner expects to see these things in a geography answer. So simple diagrams like this for say plate tectonic theory or world maps. You should learn to make world maps quickly. So means you can learn and only draw parts of world map. There are relevant parts if you cannot draw the whole thing. So these are the maps which you should write in the body parts of geography. And apart from that, in geography questions, it is mostly there you have to write the issues and then the solutions. Like if the question is on climate change or the question is on flood, then you simply need to write what are the issues which are being faced, why we have these persistent problems, and then the solutions, whether the solutions have been asked or not. And while writing the solutions, if the question is on disaster, then NDMA guidelines can be very helpful. You should remember 5 recommendations for every disaster. If you Google NDMA guidelines on flood and remember 5 of them, Google NDMA guidelines on cyclone, remember 5 of them, and you can go on like that and remember NDMA guidelines on all the disasters. If the question is on climate change, then IPCC recommendations. So in this way you can write your way forward for geography questions. So that was about GS1. I think we can move on to GS2. Right? So GS2 can divide it into polity and then social justice and governance and IR. So I will firstly discuss polity, then social justice and governance, and then IR. In polity, the introduction for me it usually was the article of constitution, because most of the polity questions in some way or another deal with some part from the constitution. And say if it is not from constitution, then whatever statutory body, if it is talking about say CBI, then what act it was, DPSC Act of 1946. So some such act or something, means you should give where that particular body, particular concept is originating, that you can mention in your introduction part. And after writing the introduction, the body part, my opinion, to fetch more marks in polity questions, your body should have certain pointers such as Supreme Court judgments, current examples. I will explain all of them in current examples, Supreme Court judgment, recommendations of committees, and is there majorly this is what I can remember right now. So while in the body format, inculcating these things to your answer will take a lot of time and practice. So what you can do is prepare say 2 pages of SC judgments, 2 pages of, and current examples you can list them down by reading the newspapers, what is going on in the newspapers, especially between pre and mains. Means how many of you are giving mains this time? So especially you guys should try to read the newspaper daily, see what questions are there, means what events are happening in polity, on which questions can be framed, and you should write those examples in your static notes. Say if there is something going on anti-defection in the newspaper, so wherever you have written anti-defection in your static notes, you should go there and add the recent example, so that when you read the static notes, the current also gets revised. So that is for current examples. And there is Supreme Court judgments and recommendations of committee, especially for federalism, Sarkaria and Panchi committee, for any other constitutional issue, NCRWC. Most of these are given in Lakshmikant book. So if you read those chapters, like at the end of chapter 14, I think there is Sarkaria commission and Panchi commission, and NCRWC is a chapter in itself towards the end. So if you read those things and try to inculcate them in your answers, then especially in way forward part, this can be very useful. If there is a question on governor, the recommendations of, or a question on emergency, the recommendation of Sarkaria Commission or Panchi Commission, or even Supreme Court recommendation in Bomai case. So these things you can write in your way forward, so that your way forward looks appealing. It will immediately add 0.5 or 1 to your marks in that question. So that is the body part for polity. And then the conclusion in polity is simply the, say, DPSP, fundamental duty, or preamble. Any question on polity, you will find that it has some or other linkages to either one of these three. So you can simply quote that by doing so and so. It will help achieve the goal enshrined in Article 48, 44, or whatever. So this way you can conclude your answers on polity. So that was about polity, I guess. And we can move on to social justice and governance. Social justice and governance, the introduction usually for me was a stat, because these are the things you read very often. There is a question on health, there is a question on education, there is a question on poverty. These are things you have read a lot, so you have a lot of statistics on these issues, so you can simply write a relevant stat in introduction. And in body, this this is the area where you have the most scope to draw diagrams, like block diagrams. I used to draw many such diagrams. For example, I will show you one. Say if there is poverty, there is a question on poverty, and it will lead to low income, poor, health, education, poor HR, and poverty. So these kinds of circle based diagrams I used to draw a lot in governance portion. And you can even prepare such diagrams. Say this one I prepared on poverty beforehand itself, so that if there is a question on poverty in issues, I can write it. Whatever the question is, it will generally revolve around this theme. So you can insert that diagram, such generic diagrams which you can insert questions, because the themes in social justice, or even in governance, civil service and good governance, basically these portions, the questions which are asked on very well read and well repeated themes. So you can have ready-made diagrams available and good stats available. So you should try to use those things in your answers. And apart from diagrams, what else we can do in the body? Yes, if possible, we can do bucketing. Say if there is a question on, let's say, health or education, then we can write social issues caused by lack of health, political issues caused by it, and why pestle, basically. You can use that very well in governance and social justice questions. So uh, that is about the body part. And in conclusion, SDGs work very well even over here. You remember the SDGs as well as DPSP, you can do it. And if, because these are the questions, say if you know a committee on health or a committee on education, say on education you know Kasturi Rangan committee or what, any other committee, you can write its one good recommendation which is relevant to the question that has been asked in your conclusion. So that is introduction plus committee, DPSP, SDG and committees. These are the conclusions for social justice and governance part. So After this, we go to IR. IR, the introduction basically is you need to prepare it in advance for every possible scenario. Like if the question is on India, USA, then since I had IR, I did not have much difficulty in working out the introductions. But you can also, if you do some Google search or see some topper copies, you will find ready-made templates on, like if there is a question on India, USA, you can quote Dennis Cook's From Estranged Democracy to Engaged Democracy, Estranged Democracy in Cold War to Engaged Democracy in Post-Cold War era. So that is my introduction on India, USA. Similarly, on India, Russia, PM Modi's comment that every child in India knows that Russia is its best friend. So for every such partners of India, India, Russia, similarly for India, Japan, India, Africa, India, Pakistan, India's other neighbors, for every relations you should have a intro. Ideally, I'm saying I had it because I also had CSIR as my optional, so I had ready-made introductions for India's ties with any organization, any nation. And if the question is on organization, you can simply quote the members of the organization or the GDP and population in the organization. Say if the question is on BIMSTEC, then you can write BIMSTEC or SARC or SCO. Then you can write that SCO has 8 members or 7 members, whatever the number of members are there in SCO. You can name them. You can even draw a diagram. Say these are the 8 members of SCO. You can write SCO here and name the 8 members. And above it, you can say that SCO has whatever 20% of the global GDP, 40% of global population, and so on. You can prepare like this for 5 or 6 organizations, because only those organizations are going to be asked. So that is hardly 5 or 6 lines, but your introduction becomes very distinguished. Like the examiner will be impressed that okay, he knows what is the percentage of population, what is the percentage of global GDP, that organization. So that will be helpful, and it will hardly take 5 minutes to search on Google. So, and you can draw diagrams like this. So that is introduction when the question is on any international organization, and when the question is on India's ties with any country, then introduction needs to be like that. So that was my approach to introduction in IR. After this, the body part of IR, I had PSIR optional, but even the writing body in the optional paper and GS paper is significantly different. In the body part of IR in GS paper, you need to break it down into multiple dimensions. For example, strategic dimension, and then there is defense, there is economy, then there is cultural links, impact on world order, soft power, and you can go on. You can even make 10 dimensions, and depending upon the country in question or the organization in question, you should write at least 5 or 6 of them. So that is about the body part of IR, in which the main thing that you need to do is do the bucketing. Many people call it bucketing. That is making, rather than writing simple points, you should try to underline this strategic aspect and then write it, that how the US ties are to balance the rise of China. So, and then you write defense, and then you say Lemoa, Comcasa, Bika have been agreed. And then you go on economic and say $120 billion trade. So like that you can go on, and you need to do this bucketing thing. That makes your answer look impressive in IR. And after the body part, what is the conclusion? IR. The conclusion is usually a way forward. Say, what is the future trajectory of the ties that is expected if we are talking about relation of India with any other country. So the future trajectory of ties we can discuss, or suggestion of some bureaucrat or diplomat, if you remember them, if you have read them and written them from newspaper, then you can write that in your, because I had IR, so I had many of them. So I used to write it, diplomat suggestions or future trajectory. Or if you do not remember diplomat suggestions, you can simply give your own perspective that what we should do to improve the ties. So that is the conclusion part of IR. And now shall we move on to GS3? So in GS3, we will break it down into economy, culture, environment and disaster, which has been more or less discussed in GS1, science and technology, security. So these are the 5 components of GS3. And in economy, the main focus that you need to do is you need to try and inculcate more and more. Firstly, read the budget summary. I used to read only summary because you have limited time now. If you have read survey or budget before prelims, then it is very good. You can revise what you have read. But if you have not read it, then at least read the summary. And make your own short notes. I made 4-page notes of economic survey and 4-page notes of budget, and I quoted them extensively in almost all the answers of economy. I quoted, means my marks in PS3 were 93, I guess, which are okay marks for this time. The highest was, I think, 105. So I used to quote budget and economic survey extensively in my answer. Similarly, Niti Aayog reports at 75. I think there is a summary by Next IAS which I read, and a Niti Aayog 3-year action agenda. So prepare 3 or 4 page notes. Like this, you have set 15 to 20 pages of differentiated content. You can prepare these notes in less than 1 day. And after preparing these notes, you have 15 to 20 pages of differentiated content, which you should try to sprinkle across all your economy answers. Say if there are 4 or 5 economy answers, that questions that has been asked in GS3, then you should try to ensure that you are writing at least 3 to 4 points from these 20 pages in every answer that has been asked. So that will come when you have memorized these notes, and while practicing GS tests in test series, you have tried to inculcate these points into your answer. So then you can do it in the final answers, and it makes your answers really very impressive. So you should try to do that. Especially these economic survey recommendations or Niti Aayog recommendations make very good way forward, or even conclusion economic questions. And apart from that, in economic questions, I did not do any bucketing. I used to follow simple point format, and I used to try to write as many stats and facts as I remember. And one more thing, in economy, you should mention government schemes if you can remember. Say if there is a question on financial inclusion, whatever steps have been taken by RBI, NPCI, and Ministry of Finance, you remember them and quote them. Say if you remember a few committees, Nachiket More committee, other such committees, if you remember and you quote them anywhere in your answer, it will add a lot of value to your answer. So that is about the economy part. After economy, we will discuss agriculture. Agriculture, I could not innovate a lot in terms of answer writing. I firstly made the notes for every point which has been given in the syllabus. I made 3-4 pages of notes. Then in agriculture, my introduction simply was some stat. Then in body, I used to write whatever issues I had mugged up, because the questions are very similar and on repeated themes in agriculture. Like on food processing industry, there is a similar question every year, or on MSP and FCI, Food Corporation of India, PDS. So these are very repeated themes. I had written the issues and remembered them. Hardly took 5 to 10 pages, and the questions on agriculture usually revolve around those issues. So I simply remembered the issues, and here in way forward you can innovate. This is my opinion. You can write the novel interventions, the new aspects that are taking place in agriculture. So, for example, I used to write like this time nano urea liquid was coming. So if there is a question on how to improve farmer income, or how to improve productivity on agriculture, you can write what novel interventions are taking place, such as there is nano urea liquid, or organic agriculture, or what it is, vertical farming, horizontal farming, and other such things which are new. Most of these I read during my prelims, so I'm and I could recall them, so I noted them down, and then I used this in the way forward of my agriculture questions, because you read a lot of agriculture during your prelim, so that you can use as way forward, and it looks really impressive, because other people will be writing the same old stuff, that you need to do mechanization, you need to reduce, reform the marketing, cold storage. So if instead of along with this, if along with this you are writing these things as well, that is 0 0.5 or 1 marks extra. So that is about the body part. And in conclusion, I used to link whatever has been asked, that if you take such and such steps, it will help achieve Ashok Dalwai committee's target of doubling farmers' income, S. Swaminathan committee's target of evergreen revolution, or such 3 4 means taglines I had, and I used to write them. Like if there are 4 questions on agriculture, you need to have only 4 taglines, and connect one tagline with one answer. So 4 conclusions you have if you have 4 taglines on agriculture. So that is the conclusion part for agriculture. And after agriculture, what we have after agriculture is science and technology. Science and technology for me was one of my weakest aspects, and I did not read a lot on this. I only did the NCRTs. But what I did was I made 1 pager notes on all the topics that had been mentioned: robotics and biotechnology, IPR issues, nanotechnology. On all of them, I had made 1 page notes. So, say for example, if the question is on biotechnology, so how much percent of GDP and how many $1 billion is biotechnology industry sector, that you can write. Similarly, if there is nanotechnology, you can say that 1 nanometer to 100 nanometer, I think, is nanotechnology, and how nanomission or something is leading to revolution, has revolutionized nanotechnology in India. So such things you can write. Means basically what I'm trying to say is, for introduction, science and technology, for every top means keyword that has been mentioned in the syllabus, you should have one ready stat which you can put in your introduction, because the question would be very generic. Say it usually asks about the applications. What are the recent applications of, say, anything, was nanotubes was asked recently, 1 or 2 year back, carbon nanotube or something like that. If it is there, then if the applications are asked, you need to remember some buckets. For any technology, the applications are in some sectors such as space, agriculture, health, education, defense, and some more like this. There should be 7 or 8 at least. Now, if you take biotechnology, will have applications in all these. If you take nanotechnology, it will have applications on all these. If you take robotics, it will have applications in all these. If you take AI, has applications in all these. So these are the buckets which you can remember, and whenever the applications are asked, you can simply write this space, and here the application of biotechnology is this, or nanotechnology is this, one line after that, agriculture, health, education, defense, and so on. That is science and technology. Science and technology. What is left? Disaster management. We so authority in science and focus on not remember what I had if I had anything. Focus on future. How, or you can simply write one of the novel new schemes that the government has. Question is on biotechnology development strategy by the government, and the step in the right direction, or it will help revolution biotechnology. Early some new has been taken in nanotech. Can mention that okay, this has been taken right direction for the advanced. Here the intro can simply be definition, because for most concepts, like if there is cyber security, IT, and early if the laundering. So to have these definitions authentic, if you Google them, you will find them and write them down and use them as your intro. That is the introduction for most of the security. If the question is on left wing, so here you can quote MHA report that I think 46 earlier it was, so how it has reduced. For every topic you have one ready stat, and that is the part. Body part, what I would like to add is the way forward, but just what you can do extra in 30 questions for some initiatives, some recent initiatives. The question is on cyber security, cyber swachhta केंद्र, Bharat Botnet Center, PRO, cyber volunteer program. Initiatives you can mention in the way forward, and the challenges also. If reading the news, you will find that lot of security comes. There has been any recent ransomware attack. What is the ransom? Write it issue. So you means while you are reading the newspaper, highlight those examples and add them into your static note. So when you read your static note, you will remember these new examples and will be able to add them in your answer. That is about the challenges and the way forward. In way forward, you can mention a lot of new initiatives that government has, as I gave. So that is the body. Conclusion, I had some difficulty in writing the conclusion for this, but what I did was I remembered some quotes because I could not think of any other conclusion. Very good, but not come up with them. So I googled some security, because there would be 4 questions, 4 ready-made conclusions. One of them was Campbell talks about and intake of India. So how whatever we have discussed above will help us in the vision. The one conclusion is that apart from that, I remembered 3 quotes related to the security of India. I wrote in the conclusion that above steps because 90% of my questions I gave way forward just above conclusion. My conclusion was how way forward will help achieve a higher objective. To implement the way forward, it will help achieve a higher objective. So it can be preamble or it can be any of the quotes. I would say that taking these steps will help uphold the vision, and so that was my conclusions are based on the premise that just before the you have written way forward, whether it has been asked in the question or not, you have written, and then in conclusion I used to link whatever way forward was, that how doing this would help achieve a higher objective. That higher objective could be preamble, it could be SDG, it could that I would write and link the way forward. So that was the part for secure. And now I think we want to here I will discuss then theory part. Here you have a lot of topper copy. They all write hundreds of different and get good marks. So it depends a lot on the person. Yes, you have less scope for innovation and your own style, because most of the toppers, I'm all but 90 or 70-80% are writing the point formats, the bucketing definition or stats in it. Here you have a lot of space for innovation for your discussion. What I used to do, I can tell you, and I got 160. The theory part, I used substantial introduction, is simply the definition, because there are a lot of keys all around the body. Or my first 2 attempts, I used to write a lot of definition, but this time I also tried to give quotes. I read Sharma ma'am's copies and start a lot of her answers. In fact, if you copy all the answers, start with a quote and definition. Give both of them in. Firstly, she will give a quote, then go on to define. So introduction starts, but it starts with a quote. So that is the format she followed, and I also tried to follow it this time. My previous 2 minutes, I did not follow this format, and I used to write only marks just to. So I'm not saying that quotes are mandated to accommodate every word and note of summarize them and cover them. So it might take a lot of time, but if you do it, I'm sure it will. So that is the production part for theory. Body parts, what I used to do is I write make 2 subheadings. My approach was very mechanical. For every question, I use subheadings. Whatever the question is asking, I try to break it down into major questions that is asking, or 2 things that I want to address in the issues or way forward, the same, or can be anything else depending upon the question, but 2 subheadings. That was my approach, and in every subheading I used to 3 to 5 points, and every point I used to give with an example. So the point itself might be very small. So if you are writing 5 subheading, 5 points heading, the length of each your 4 lines, and every out of 3 or 4 lines, the body a statement in that point will only be 1 line, or at max 1 or 2 lines, and the example take more part of my point. For example, I will write it here. That is sample structure of an theory part answer. This is the subheading. I have written 3 points, and in this much only would be and here I would write, for example, lines. Lines would be the example, because examples make your answer more interesting. You will read any copies, then you will realize that without the examples, the answers are very, very monotone. So I tried to write one example with every point. But for that, what you need to do is you need to have a lot of examples. You need to a lot of examples in order to be able to connect every point with an example. So for that, what I did is I made 3 or 4 pages of notes of just examples, like examples of good bureaucrats, bad bureaucrats, examples of ethical activity life, examples of unethical activity life, examples of sports, examples of unethical behavior in, like that. For every of these, I used 5 to 10 examples. I remembered them, then I tried to inculcate them in. For course for ethics, the basic notes I made after reading lexicon, but things like these quotes you will not get there. For these quotes, I refer to Well, ma'am has summarized the quote very well. She was AIR-78 UPSC CSE 2020. So her Telegram channels, I think she had done 30 or 40 pages of quotes. Those quotes have been organized on the basis of the keywords given in the syllabus of the ethics paper, like 2 quotes on it, quotes on work culture, quotes on probity in governance. So like that, she has given. I I got my. For examples, I refer to newspapers and various other sources to build my list of. No, I did not. I could not divide them as per words mentioned in this, because the same example can be used, and it can be used partiality. It can be used at many places. So dedication to public service. So that is why I did not organize them based on keywords. I simply organized them based on like this: ethics in daily life and unethical behavior in daily life, bureaucracy, unethical behavior in bureaucracy. And like these, I remembered the example made and remembered quotes and behavior in. I think ethics in mythology, unethical behavior in mythology. You can go to Mahabharata. The behavior of Arjun, the behavior of Lord Ram can be in examples on the sides, and Jodhan, Ravan, these on the unethical. The answers are in my notes. My notes, I think 5 to 10 examples per. Say if I'm writing ethics in mythology, 5 examples of ethical behavior, 5 examples of unethical. There is ethic. 5 examples of ethical behavior in, examples of unethical behavior. So like that, 5 examples for each subheading. For bureaucracy, IAS and IPS, I prepared around 20 for ethical behavior in bureaucracy, and 10 or 15 unethical. Because bureaucracy, examples from bureaucracy quote at a lot of places. Question is on value, aptitude, attitude. Quote these examples. So the examples of bureaucrats you can make an exception, and for others 5 or 10 are. So these were the
Sir,
subheadings.
sir, may I ask one question?
Yes,
Sir, what was your source to collect mythological examples? So personally, I don't have any knowledge who was like ethical and unethical in those mythology. So can you tell where you collected those examples from?
so I had some basic knowledge. I do not have deep knowledge. So firstly referred to topper copies, many toppers, and then secondly I reflected what I know. I tried to find ethical and unethical the mythology. I know only the basic story, but even that can be enough. If you reflect, you find that you know enough to write 4 or 5. Apart from that, I think Mehak Jan M on her Telegram channel, if she has shared the notes of mythological examples. Rank 7 has shared the notes of mythological ethics and unethical behavior in mythology on her Telegram channel. I found it somewhere on her Telegram. Whether she has created, I refer to those notes. Those notes also use
Okay, sir. Thank you.
quotes. For one or two along these lines, that is about the theory part. Conclusion, I used to my third main. All my conclusions were because I read this, but this lot of quotes, lot of case study. This basic structure they ask in the question itself, like evaluate the merits and what will be your course, what will be your just. You do not need to worry a lot about of case, but to get more marks and helps a little that use ethical terminology. Words that you in the theory part, such as cognitive, attitude, persuasion, other such keywords, work culture, can incorporate more and more of those into your case study. You will get more marks because the answers of case studies, if you read anybody's copy, you will find they are generic and written in layman's language. But if you can use more and more ethical terminology, that introduction for case, you write the crux of the case, what has been asked, like 3 or 4 points I use commas, it for 3 lines, and it will basically be like this. It talks about uh, uh, poor work culture due to pressure of seniors and lack of uh, uh, good quality public service, and 1 or 2 more things like that. I would try to give my introduction. After introduction in the body part, guided by the question, and you can use ethical terminology. Yes, in introduction you can also link it with the recent example. So if the protest, uh, question is talking about protests, protests are going on and they are threatening to turn violent. Then you can, the example of such a scenario was recently witnessed the farmer protest, or can link it with the current examples in the introduction. You remember that such happened the current example. The body, the structure is decided and corporate ethics in it, what I know. And then because I mugged them, I used them. I just made an effort that I'm not repeating single quote twice because a lot of them was case. I have left essay for the end because I had only 160, not the right. I I believe that identify your strength. You are good at, not the case. Write 3 or 4 will find where you are getting more marks, which you are more comfortable. I was more comfortable in theory section, so I started with the theory. If you are more comfortable, start with. So when I started with this section, I tried to ensure that time distribution 1 hour 30 minutes for 1 hour 30 minutes. But whatever you start in the beginning, that will go into 1 hour 40 or 1 hour 40. You start case, you will have very little time for theory, and if you start with theory, have very little, because ethics is the lengthiest paper. So you will have time crunch. Whatever you start in the beginning, you will not be able to complete 1 hour 30. Turn into 1 hour 40, 1 hour 40, or 50. So to try to keep at 1 hour 30. Ideal case for me, it ran 1 hour 40 minutes. So it was very difficult because cases are usually longer. I had only 1 hour 20 minutes. Most of the people and most of the toppers write case studies in the beginning only because case studies are lengthier. And for the end, you have 1 hour 20 minutes. You have to write 6. That is very difficult. But I had practiced them earlier and I went into the exam with the attitude that I will not get a lot of marks in. I will try to get more marks in the theory. So my case studies were try to just keep them average or above average. And theory section, I tried to make, or but that is because you need to identify what is your strength, what you can make good or very good, or what you cannot make. That is the trade-off, because the lengthiest paper. That is why all this micro analysis. Because ethics, there is always a trade-off. You cannot write everything that you have practiced or everything that you know, because the time is very limited. That was about what you should, how you should. Now about essay, I have one, so not an and what I did, I had 1 or 2 and had, I think it was a PDF Alarm IAS Max Max had quite good section of anecdotes, multiple philosophical essays as in your intro. So I mugged that PDF and wrote and after that the body part there will be a philosophical essay, right? Basically a quote or a good state. So I would try to prove it across various dimensions. Would try to prove that firstly, after introduction, 1 or 2 pages of analysis or the meaning of the state, what I understood. I will write intro. Then of me or elaboration of the topic, what I understood. Then in the body part, prove the event across history. After that, I would write the challenges, run into 4 or 5. That I would the challenges, why there are some difficulties in implementing the statement, or why this statement is not tested in the real life. That will challenges 1 to 2. Then the way forward, how we can move towards the vision discussion. Then 0 point there I would link way forward with higher concept. What I did, like here have more space by for some long poems or some long jokes. Bhavantu. Early some of Alfred or tennis or tennis. So these are very generic and can be used in a lot of because what you are doing here, you are particular and you are addressing directly what was the topic in the essay. But in my conclusion, what I use here, I am connecting whatever has been a statement of a higher goal. So I decide the higher goal. So that higher goal can be any poem, can be any mantra or slok, or any good set of lines, and I would connect the statement that was given in the question, that higher goal. That way forward, if we follow this, then it will help us achieve. Yes, it is based on philosophical essays. The structure I work because here the topic would usually be a philosophical. Usually they are a good state. Talking about some ethical value or some idea, you have to elaborate on that. Philosophic. No, yes. Pastel approach works not only for GS questions but even in philosophical. Say if there is a question on happiness, what is meaning of happiness or anything, the theme is around happiness, then you can say what is happiness in there is low criminalization, the people are empowered, then in economic sphere happiness equality on. So sphere where happiness is when ST gender have technological or digital divide, there is like that. Whatever philosophical has been asked, that expand along this. Yes. So I said I am not very good at writing essay, but what I used to do is I worked out this format and I used to implement it. So I was sure that this format I will not get less than 110. I was also sure that I will not get more than 1. I was fairly confident that my score will be in this range. Because this approach brings a lot of diversity to your essay. You are interpreting this essay across various lines. Not many people will interpret it along these many lines. So you can be sure to get above average mark. But you will not get very good marks because this is very mechanical as well. Connecting up paragraphs will be very difficult because in one paragraph you are talking about politics, the next you are talking about economic dimension. So making the flow is very difficult. The examiner might find the essay to be mechanical. That is why he will not give you 140 marks for. But for me, I knew essay will never be my. Was happy. Yes, you should give all. Like when you are proving it in political, give an example. You are proving happiness. Give an example. If some states took some good step to reduce criminalization, give that case that okay, Odisha did and so also criminalization down led to happiness. So in this way, you can inculcate examples and facts and data within this format. हाँ, इंट्रोडक्शन और कंक्लूजन के लिए ये है मार्क्स में कभी नहीं, लेकिन तो किसी का था तो मेरे को वहाँ से मिला, मुझे पता नहीं। मैं अपने टेलीग्राम चैनल पे डाल दूंगा, मेरे पास तो पड़ा ही है, मैं अपने डाल दूंगा। आप ये है मेरा, आज ही डाल। मैंने फर्स्ट जब दिया था ये अप्रोच फॉलो किया था, मेरे 120 आए थे। सेकंड अप्रोच में मैंने सोचा 120, तो मैंने ये अप्रोच क्रिएट राइटिंग कर, मतलब इसकी जगह कुछ अच्छी अच्छी चीज़ें जो अगर मान लो इकोनॉमिक डायमेंशन इसी को एक्सपेंड कर दिया, मल्टी डायमेंशनल क्रिएटिव ऐसे लिखने, तो 105 हो गए। तो फिर मैंने थर्ड में सोच लिया 40 तो नहीं 120 ही आ जाए, वही ठीक है। फिर मैंने फिर से ये अप्रोच फॉलो किया और 100 ऐसे। मेरा इम्प्रूवमेंट तो बेसिकली यही सब जो मैंने बताया, यही सब मेरे को पहले अटेम्प्ट में कुछ नहीं, मैं सब चीज़ें मैंने वर्कआउट की धीरे धीरे अपने आंसर्स में, आपको पता भी चल जाता। तो आंसर पता होना और आंसर्स में इनकलकेट होना अलग बात है, उसमें बहुत प्रैक्टिस और टाइम लगता है। तो पहले अटेम्प्ट में मुझे ज़्यादा चीज़ें और प्रैक्टिस मेरे तो ये यही जो मैंने अभी बताया, ये पहले तो धीरे धीरे जब PSIR चली थोड़ा छूट रहा था, ज़्यादा नहीं, मतलब हो सकता है किसी केस ऑप्शनल मेरा हर बार कंप्लीट केस में पहले पेपर में क्रॉस 4 पेपर से आई माइट हैव लेफ्ट 2 और 3 क्रॉस 4 पेपर ऑन एन एवरेज 0.5 टू 0.1 क्वेश्चन पर पेपर। बार तो 0 कब हुआ था, दोनों में बहुत कम छूटा था, बहुत ज़्यादा। एक क्वेश्चन अगर किसी में तो बड़ी बात है, किसी